Welcome to the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, home for all things holistic and healthful for our pets, improving the lives of our pets and ourselves. I'm your host, Angela, also known as the Holistic Feline on Instagram. Fellow producer Fred is here along with us. You are in for a treat. These next 2 episodes are jam-packed with information and products to help you and your pet live long, healthful lives together. Did you know our dogs and cats should be living well into their 20s and 30s? Yes, you heard that right. And Dr. Zoolittle, also known as Penny Wood, is a longevity health and welfare zoologist and applied cognitive ethologist. We are discussing her 7 pillars of animal longevity, how to increase your pet's lifespan, healthspan, and heal holistically. She is my Ivy League soul sister, and she breaks down every aspect on how we can get our pets on the track of healing and living holistically well into their 20s and 30s. Penny has a unique perspective on the innate needs of our pets. Having studied their natural behaviors in the wild, she's a true voice for the animals. She's an encyclopedia of knowledge, and there is so much to learn from her. You will walk away informed, empowered, with tangible knowledge and products to jumpstart your longevity journey. These episodes are created and shared with love for the health and well-being of you and your pets. May we all live to optimal lifespans and healthspans side by side. Get ready. Here we go. Bring your notebooks. Here is Dr. Zoolittle. Welcome, Penny, also known as Dr. Zoolittle. I cannot begin to describe how excited and grateful I am and how lucky I feel to have you join us. You are a wealth of knowledge and truly have our pets' best interests in heart and mind. A longevity crusader, taking it back to the wild, which is what I've always said we should be doing with our pets. And so without further ado, I am so excited to dive in with you. And may we start with introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the privilege, because it is such a joy for me to be talking about animals and sharing what I know, because it does no good stuck in my head when it can be out in the world helping the pets who really need it. So first of all, that. So I'm a longevity zoologist, and you probably haven't come across too many of those because I actually haven't found too many people myself in this industry. Typically, a zoologist would be, well, a zoologist, just to start off with that, is the scientist who studies animals, but that's a pretty broad topic. So within that, my background, my undergrad, my early career was all in cognitive ethology, which is the study of animal behavior on a cognitive level, the relationship side, problem solving, kind of the prefrontal cortex, executive functions of the animals. And then I would apply that to how do we look after them? How are we shaping a life where they live in proximity to us, either in the zoo or in the home? And what can we be doing to improve the quality of life that we are giving them based on what we know about what's important for their internal world? So that's my background. And then moving into the longevity piece, there are a number of aspects of what actually is animal welfare. And so what I'd been focusing on was that internal world, the Umwelt, we call it, or the experienced life of the animal, what they perceive, what their level of satisfaction, joy, engagement, all that kind of stuff is. But there's also the side of, well, how does my body feel, right? So welfare is how healthy is the animal and how happy is the animal. So I went back and thought, gosh, I really need to fill the gaps in my knowledge on how to do the health side of welfare. And because I'd been working alongside vets with my own pets, but also vets in the zoo, you could start to see there was a pattern of what I would say is solutions that don't meet the criteria that I believe animals are worthy of. So that's my opinion, right? So my opinion is the animals deserve the absolute best. And I was seeing a medical model. Bear in mind, I'm talking about the model, not the people themselves who clearly love the animals, but the model itself was flawed. The model itself wasn't curing animals, which meant they weren't regaining the quality of life and the level of welfare that I thought they deserved. So I thought, I wonder what the answer to that is. What can I do to fill my knowledge gaps to provide the other side of the welfare coin? And by so doing, actually come up with a better model. Not that I was going to be the genius, but I knew someone else had been the genius and I just need to go and find what it was to actually do the job properly, which is to restore health, which is to give that fullness of life on both sides of welfare so that they can be fully happy and fully healthy. So that then really gets bundled together. It's like, how do you explain that in like 3 words? So longevity zoologist is one way of explaining it, but you could say welfare scientist, welfare zoologist, cognitive ethologist. There's a bunch of different names. So it's just trying to explain the whole sort of 360 animal welfare in one go.
Ivy League. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a literal question. What is the natural, safe, and kind way to increase the lifespan and health span of our pets?
Okay, big question to start with. You're not pulling out the little guns here. So the way to understand health, right? We've accidentally kind of put health on this pedestal that says, well, we don't know anything about health. We have to go to a professional to understand it. And in reality, we're all walking around with health until we're not. So we're actually pretty good at knowing what health is. We can identify it in ourselves super fast. And if we're quite connected and in tune with our animals, then we can detect and see that in how they're behaving and responding. So we're quite connected from that point of view. But when it comes to the mechanics of it, we then tend to defer our inquiries and our decision making to an expert, which is fine. But I think there's a piece missing. I think we should really be looking at having a lot more autonomy and understanding ourselves, not into the whole science and the complicated 6-year degree and all the rest of it, but in the, okay, what's actually driving health? And health, when you boil it down, is balance in the body. Balance in the body. Okay, so you've got the possibility of your cells functioning as they're supposed to or not. And so if we want them to function as they're supposed to, which then confers health, we want them to be not too much and not too little. So I like to think of it as baby bear's porridge. So the Goldilocks story, okay, she came along, she broke into their house, she did some criminal things, she ate their food and stole some stuff and broke some stuff, right? She's the criminal in the piece, but that's not important. What's important is baby bear had all the wisdom. Baby bear had the balance of the situation. It wasn't too hot or too hard or too cold or whatever, right? It was just right. And so that's what our bodies and our pets' bodies are constantly trying to do. Every second of every day, there's a million enzymes and chemical reactions going on across more than a million. I don't even know. Nobody knows the number, right? Keeping us healthy. So if we're going to understand how to extend the health span, and health span just means how long of your life that you remain healthy before you have let's say, an old age decline. Okay, so we're wanting to extend the health span to make it correlate to the same duration as our lifespan, so that there isn't that tail end of suffering, there isn't those years of decline, there isn't that limitation on life where welfare is diminished. So to extend the health span, we have to understand, what does the body need? And it's really, really simple. In a nutshell, it needs balance, but I like to think of it as 5 things that the body needs. It's DNA, which we have. Our pets have their DNA. Something called mitochondria, which is inside every cell and produces the energy, because you can't do anything if you haven't got any energy to run it. So if your phone battery is empty, you're not making a call. If you don't have enough energy in your body, you're not going to get well. It's that simple. So we need the instructions, which is the DNA. We need the energy, which is the mitochondria. We need the actual functionality, the actual making, producing, doing side of it. So that's your cell function. Then we need the defense force, if you like. So that's the immune system that's going to protect everybody and everything. It's also the intelligence agencies that are gathering data and acquiring more knowledge for better protection and safety. So that's the immune system. So that's part 4. And then part 5 is this thing called flow, right? And we know about flow in terms of the mental space, which is fab, but this is a little different. We're talking about the flow of nutrients, the flow of oxygen, the flow of water, the flow of blood, the flow of electricity, and then the outward flow of toxins. So the body's going to take in the things that it needs to power that to remain in health, and it needs to be able to eliminate the things that it doesn't require. And if any of those things get blocked, then again, we don't have functionality, therefore we don't have health. So that's a very simple framework of 5 steps, and you don't need to do much with that. I just share that with people because if you don't start with the absolute foundation basic of what is health and am I equipped to do it, right? I don't have to always see the vet, because you don't. But you don't have to know any more about that stuff other than to know that there are 5 foundational things that when they're working correctly, your animal is going to be healthy. And then you look at, okay, well, what do I need to do? But let me give the question back to you so that I take you in the right direction.
I'm lost for words. I'm wrapping my head around everything you just said. So with those 5 foundational factors, is there something that you suggest that we do to keep all of that in balance and work in order to increase lifespan and health span?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're the first principles, if you like. So to understand health, you have to understand biology. And I just simplified biology down to those 5 things for you. So biology, 6 years of medical school or however many years of undergrad, of high school science or whatever, there's your 5 things for what's going to do life, okay? So those 5 things are your foundation. But then what do you do with that? You need to apply that. You need to have actions because you're going to live in your body. Your cats are going to live in their body. They need to do something with it. And you're the decision maker for them. So really, you need to be deciding what you're going to give or provide them with so that their bodies can then continue in that direction of health. So I've simplified what I went and discovered when my mission was to go and see, okay, how do I provide a better model? What is the better model? What actually works for animals to cure them? And that's a very dangerous word when you talk to some professionals, right? It's a very scary word for litigation and stuff like that. But realistically, I'm talking about this from a cellular point of view, right? To cure just means to restore, to repair, to fix, to reverse, to get healthy again, right? There shouldn't be any sort of stigma around using that word. So when our DNA, which I've just introduced, knows the rules of the game, has the information, knows what to do, and you've got enough energy, and your cells are working properly because they're properly nourished, for example, and your immune system is acquiring more knowledge to add into the DNA and get everything operating as it should, and there's a flow in and out of what you require, then you are going to regain health. You are going to cure. You are going to heal. You are going to restore the welfare. So I took all the knowledge that I discovered. Mind you, I thought I was going on a 4-week side tangent from my cognitive ethology branch with the mental health and welfare stuff to go and just quickly go find out the answer to that question. It ended up being 4 years. So I know you don't have 4 years. So here's the condensed version of what you need to know to make those 5 principles actually a reality for your pets. So I condensed it down to what I call the 7 pillars of animal longevity. And you could equally call this the 7 pillars of animal health, because here's the spoiler. The process that drives the disease onset in a body is exactly the same process that drives the aging process. Okay, they're both a decay of functionality. And when you can stop that and even repair and reverse it, you will not just put a halt to disease progression and symptomology, so therefore you will start to heal, yeah, but you will also slow down the aging process, therefore live longer as a result, but not live longer in a place of suffering, but live longer in a place of sparkling health. So you get a 2-for-1, which is what I love so much about this part of it, because for me, at the end of the day, it's about the animal's lived experiences. How do they feel? How happy are they? And can we provide them with the best? And the answer is we can, and it's really simple. 7 pillars of animal longevity cover the 7 aspects of the lifestyle that an animal has when they live under our roof, if you like. So therefore, these are things that we have control over. These are decisions that we're making for them. And if we can make wiser decisions based on their biology, based on who they are as a species, and these 5 foundations, then you are going to absolutely get a better outcome. You can't not get a better outcome. So let me run very quickly through the 7 pillars, just so you know, we'll put some sort of flesh on the bones, if you like, of that to give you a concept. And then we can unpack that in any direction that you want to go. So the 7 aspects of their lifestyle that really confer or erode health, depending on which way you do it, are species appropriate nutrition.
Yes.
Regular detoxification. The microbiomes, and I say plural because there are more than one, okay? Movement, exercise, and alignment. And those 3 things are critically important. They do go together. Number 5 is the natural environment. The natural environment, not the built environment under your roof, the natural environment. That's number 5. Number 6 is hormone regulation or hormone harmony. And number 7 is mental health and happiness. So then we kind of go back to my roots on that one, with the emotional, mental, cognitive side of the animal's experience. But the other six are pertaining really to the body. Now, you can't separate mind and body. They're not two pieces of a puzzle. They are together. But we do tend to look at them in slightly separate categories, if you like, to define them, because one of them is quite ethereal, what we're talking about, and one of them is very, very physical. But the ethereal, the mind, the emotional side of things does have a very direct chemical and other factor influence on the body. So those 7 things really do go together, and how you design your pet's lifestyle, what you choose to feed them, how you choose to detoxify their body, how you choose to set up their environment so that it is less toxic, how you support their microbiomes, how you provide them access to movement, exercise, how you correct their alignment when it goes out, how much access to nature and the natural environment they have, how much their hormones are actually in balance, right? And hormones is actually a really big topic. It's not just whether or not they can reproduce or have been spayed or neutered. We're talking about sleeping hormones and sex hormones and appetite hormones and blood sugar hormones, and the list goes on, right? So hormones is a big deal, right? And then how are you engaging their time with you? How do they live their life? What are they doing each day? How many hours are meaningful to them versus how many hours are boring or empty or sort of white noise to them? So you have control over all of that stuff. You're making a decision for them. And if you can make a decision that is a 10 out of 10 for their species biology, rather than a 3 out of 10, which is what we often tend to go to by mistake. And this is the big, big tragedy in the pet parent world, is that we love them so much, we treat them like ourselves, which is beautiful in terms of welcoming them in as a family member, spoiling them with all the bits and pieces. That's great. The problem is that we treat them like a human. And they're not a human. They're another species with different biological needs, different circadian rhythms, different behavioral suites, right? So we need to be more understanding of who they actually are to better serve their inherent needs. And those inherent needs are both mental and physical. So what happens when we treat them like a human is we give them what we give ourselves. Now, if we were super healthy and not having chronic lifestyle diseases as a normal part of our life, if we didn't have half the population on long-term drugs and pharmaceuticals, right, then being treated like a human might actually be a good thing. But as it currently stands, because we've abdicated our knowledge about how medicine works and how health works, and we've said someone in a white coat who's done the training can have all of the decision-making power, because I don't know any of it and I need to defer to your wisdom, then we allow mistakes to come into how we look after our pets. And for me, that doesn't feel like a good enough solution for the quality of life that I want to give to my animals. So by knowing a little bit in how their body's operating, so those 5 things, those 5 foundations that create health and biology, right? And then what can I do to lift it from 3 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 in each of those 7 pillars? That's all you need to know. That's literally all you need to know. And then that becomes the lifestyle that they live.
I have a question. So if our pets currently live with us, are in our lives for 7, 15 years in average, how much of a difference can we make by applying all that knowledge in their everyday life?
Well, here's the thing, because statistics and the research will give you those kinds of answers. And I wanted to know the same thing, because even as a child, when I was studying the animals, I would look into these zoological books and they would say, oh, in captivity, they live this long, but in the wild, they live for that long. And it wasn't always that captivity was longer than the wild. Sometimes it was the flip side. So I couldn't see a pattern that made sense as a kid, right? As I studied and grew older and wiser, that started to reveal itself to me. But here we have some really strong evidence to say that wild dogs, the canid species, right? So dingoes or wolves or something, right? What's their peak or ideal or best case, not the really outlier crazy numbers, but what's their decent, proper, good natural lifespan? And what is the good, decent, proper natural lifespan that we can achieve for our dogs when they are looked after in these 7 dimensions? And the answer is into their 20s.
Oh, wow.
right? So that does depend with dogs a little on how big they are. Smaller dogs will live longer than larger dogs. So there is some breed variation when it comes to the canid lifespan. But into their 20s is entirely normal, historical, possible. And yet we see on average in both the United States and in the UK that 10 and a half years is the average at which we lose our dogs. So we're looking at half their life. Imagine if we all died at 45. And that's assuming that 90 is the average. And I don't think the 90 is the average. I think for men, it's like 72 in the human world and 80 for women or something like that. So imagine you're dying in your late 30s when you knew that you could live, right, up until you're 80. Like, that's insane. And so for cats, it's pretty similar. The oldest cat recorded, now we don't know, there could be loads of them that aren't recorded that are doing the same thing, right? But the oldest cat that we know lived to 38 years old, human years. 38. And yet the average cat is dying at 15. Now, again, it's average. There are cats that live longer and shorter, but average, right? So if we said, oh, okay, let's take the outlier out of the equation and say that you should be living at least to your 25 as a cat, and maybe you can go around 30, low 30s, something like that, then again, we've halved their lifespan with getting 15. So the answer to your question is there's a huge amount of time on the table that is not being captured or retained or saved or protected or whatever word you want to use by pet parents who literally don't know what's possible. They don't, because they didn't study the science. They don't read those papers. Why would you, right? But it's not common knowledge anymore that that's what's possible. And so we don't typically think that we're doing anything wrong because we don't know that the outcome that we're getting is wrong. Now that you know the outcome that most people are getting is not good, it's not ideal, we can change that and say, well, what is it that I can do about that? So the earlier you start a longevity lifestyle for your pet, making those decisions across those 7 areas that are a 10 out of 10 instead of a 3 out of a 10, the earlier you start, the more time you're going to claim. The more of that double, that second half, you're going to give them. Now, if you didn't start when they're a baby, don't worry. Today is the best day to start. Like there's no pet that's too old to have some benefit, some increased time, some increased welfare, some increased health, some increased joy from making those changes. So it's absolutely possible for every pet to have their quality of life, their welfare improved with even just looking at 1 or 2 of those pillars.
And so I guess this question I think you just answered. As you stated, our pets are living half or less than half of the lifespan that they could be living, and that they should be living well into their 20s and 30s. And so what are we doing wrong, and how can we fix it? And is that the 7 pillars that you're suggesting? Those are the 7 things that we are potentially doing wrong, and is also how we can fix it?
So how are we getting it wrong? We're getting it wrong because we don't know what's possible. We don't know that we should get our dogs to 20 and our cats to 25. Let's just be conservative with those numbers. We don't know that. It doesn't seem normal. We go to the vet and your dog is now 10 and the dog says, okay, so for geriatric dogs, we do this. And it's like, 10? Are you kidding me? How can he possibly be 10 geriatric at 10? Right? Right? It's like telling you when you're 35 that you're geriatric. It's just like, excuse me? So we have a system that has adjusted. When I say the system, we have the allopathic veterinary model. So allopathic means a type of medicine, an approach to medicine or health that treats the symptom to lessen the severity so that you can live longer, although in a diminished capacity, using a synthetic product. Okay. That's the allopathic model. So we have the allopathic veterinary medicine model has shifted the way that it's communicated and set expectations with pet parents to condition us to believe that 10 years old is geriatric, that to get to 16 is a real milestone, is an absolutely phenomenal achievement. And under the current conditions, it actually is, right? But the current conditions are not the conditions that pets really need. So if we can change the conditions, we're getting a better outcome. The other misconception that's come out of sort of modern life, if you want to put it that way, is this unending love affair that we have with DNA. Now, DNA is amazing, I studied genetics and a bunch of other things too, but we have lived in an age where we can attribute that very easily and say, oh, well, that's out of my control. That's just my genetics. Oh, he can't do anything about that. That's just his genetics. He's always going to have that problem or predisposition, hip dysplasia or whatever, right? Because of his genes. Now, that is true, but to a much smaller degree than most people realize. And again, I refer to the literature and the studies and the research that tells me these things. And we have more than 90, that's a 90. We have more than 90% control over the health journey, health destiny of our pets. Over 90%. So less than 10% of it is genetically controlled. And with cats, it's actually a little bit higher. We have more like 95 with cats, but because dogs have been so inbred over the last couple of centuries with breeding this and breeding that and getting all those, specific and somewhat anomalous breeds sometimes, we've muddled with their genetics a bit more. So they're more sensitive. Of all the entire animal kingdom, they're the most sensitive to the genetic loading, but it's still only around 8% for dogs. Okay. So if you think about that, so let's go with 90 to round it up and be generous, right? 90% control over your pet's health. Would you like to know that that's your reality? Would you like to know that you can actually put a stop to aging, progressive diseases, chronic diseases, symptomology, bad welfare, right? And it's not bad welfare out of neglect or lack of love. It's bad welfare out of a basis of not understanding what a cat needs because you didn't study cats, which is fine.
Mm.
I did. So I can share that with you. You did something else super useful that you're going to share with me. So we all get to benefit, right? But we defer to this simple process of treating them like us because we love them so much, right? Which is a beautiful thing. But it's not always their best scenario. I teach the 7 pillars of animal longevity because it is the simplest possible model of things that you're probably already doing. So there's no great revolution in here of, oh my gosh, now you have to go and build a cat palace and staff it with servants. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they're going to love that. But you don't need to do anything really crazy and elaborate like that. It is stuff you're already doing. We're just improving your knowledge of what it is they need, right? So that you can make a 10 out of 10 choice instead of a 3, 4, 5 out of 10 choice.
Going back to some of those pillars, I do have 2 questions regarding the microbiome and the boredom aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our little Millie, and there are moments where I feel like she's choosing to just kind of sleep or be in her bed rather than interacting. And she's now a little over 2, and I guess the older she gets, the more she just looked up at me. She knows that I'm talking about her.
They always do.
She just sleeps in her bed most of the day and will come out at like 9 p.m. She'll greet us in the morning and she'll hang out for maybe an hour or so. She gets her food and then she's mostly in the bed. Sometimes she'll hang out the window, but lately she's just been in the bed. And I just feel like it's because she's bored and she's just kind of choosing to sleep. And it makes me sad to see that her day is just sleeping in the bed. And I'm like, I try different things. Sometimes she takes to it, sometimes she doesn't. If she does, it's for like a short amount of time and then it looks like she gets bored with that. I guess my question with that is, what can I do? I feel like I'm constantly trying to ask myself, how can I entertain her? What can I do? How can I enrich her life in this like captive situation and this sterile situation really is a home. There's no outdoor enrichment of smells and things to chase. So yeah, I find my heart like sad about it.
It's an amazing question. It's super important. First thing I'll say is thank you for caring so much. Second thing is welcome to cats.
Right.
And the third thing is, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do there. So here's the first thing. It's normal for a cat to be spending approximately 20 hours a day sleeping or resting. So resting could be just, they're just lazing, they're chilling, their eyes are half there, they're just immobile but alert, right? So somewhere between 18 to 20 hours a day of doing nothing but those things is normal for cats.
Okay.
So their window of activity is only going to be 4 to 6 hours in a 24-hour cycle. So that's number one. Number two, cats are crepuscular or nocturnal. So crepuscular is one of the circadian rhythm options. So we are a diurnal species, awake in the daytime, asleep at nighttime. Cats verge much more to the crepuscular, which means their activity levels peak at dawn and dusk. Those levels of low light, where it's a disadvantage for the prey because they don't have the same night vision that the cats do. And so it's a really good time for cats to be super active because it's when they've got an unfair advantage to go hunting. And then after they eat, because they eat nothing but protein, because they're an obligate carnivore,
Yes.
it's like when you have your Christmas dinner, right? You've just had a massive helping of meat and now you want to go to sleep because your digestion is drawing the blood away from your brain to process the food. And your brain is like, oh, I'm getting real sleepy. I'm just going to have a nap here, right? So the cats eat in their hunting periods. They then go and digest. So they're like, I'm going to have a sleep. And because they're a cat, their sleep goes for a very long time. And they wake up and have 10 minutes of play and do some things. And then they go back to resting. And then once the other half of the dark light cycle kicks in and we're going into dusk and twilight and all that sort of thing, they're like, yep, I'm up. I'm ready to go. I'm on all cylinders. Give me some attention and some stimulation and a bunch of stuff. And I'll probably bite your ankles and do some things too because I'm a cat. And then I'm going to go back to sleep after you feed me.
So she does bite our feet sometimes.
Right. Because they're triggered by movement, right? We're going to digress now because this is fun, but cats have two types of cones in their eyes. So cones are the ones that see color, and they have very many more rods in their eyes. This is the eye receptor cells that pick up movement and see light and shade, work with light and dark. So they're much better at night vision, partly because they've got more rods in their eyes than we do, and partly because they also have this thing called a tapetum, which is like a mirror that's on the back of their eye, so that when the light comes in, so let's say it's moonlight or starlight or something where our eyes are pretty rubbish, right? That light is coming into the cat's eye, it's bouncing off the back where there's a mirror and bouncing frontwards again and then backwards again. So they're doubling the amount of light that they can see at nighttime. So they're seeing better, and those cones are also picking up flicker and movement, light and shade. So anytime there's something that's moving fast, like your feet, they're triggered in their brain because this is not a cognitive behavior, this is an instinct behavior, directly wired into the ancient parts of the brain to go and pounce and hunt on that because they need to go and pounce and hunt that in order to survive. So that's why you're seeing that behavior. And that's why, for example, cat toys that have lots of flicker and movement to them are usually the cat's favorites, as opposed to a tennis ball, which for a dog is usually the really kind of rewarding style of things, that it doesn't do anything itself unless you throw it to the dog, right? But they'll sit there and they'll still chew it and do all these other things. The cat's not interested very much in doing that. It wants to kill it, right? So you give it a toy mouse and they'll want to kill inverted commas, and those little bunny feet will go, kicking away at the back, and the front teeth will be in there, right? So they're killing it. But after that, they're kind of done because the mouse is dead. And until you give them something else that's going to move again, they're not going to have their prey drive triggered and go through that cycle again. Anyway, that's digression over.
Love it.
But they do naturally have these short attention spans. So what you're talking about with your cat, she's only awake for this period of time, and then she just was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. That's normal. That's a cat. Cats do not have stamina in their hunting the way dogs do. Dogs can run 8-10 hours if they need to. They'll go as a pack. They're going to get together. They're going to have picked off which elk or moose or zebra or something that they're going to go for. And those animals run faster than they do. So you think, well, how's a dog ever going to get some food? Well, because a dog has stamina. And so they'll run and run and run and run and run and run. And 8 hours later, they're still running, but those zebra are getting real tired. And eventually they're going to take a tumble, or they're going to fall back, or the dogs are just going to get faster, and then they go in for the kill, right? So dogs can do that. They've got the endurance. Cats do not hunt like that. Cats are hiding in the bushes. They're hiding on a branch. They're watching, stalking, pouncing, and it's all over in 2 minutes. So your cat, when they play with you, when they interact with you, when they do life and go play, it's typically in much shorter bursts than it is for a dog.
Yeah, it's not us playing not the right way, I guess. It's good to know. Sometimes we're wondering why after 2 minutes she's over with playing, and we're wondering that. So yeah,
You can substitute in it and out. So you can have maybe 2 or 3 toys that you use in a particular session, but don't imagine that the play session is going to go much more than 10 minutes. So when one gets boring, you can take that one away and reveal the other one, which does something different. So you might have a mouse with catnip in him, for example, and then you might have a fishing rod one, for example. So you've totally switched up the type of toy it is, but you can re-engage the interest and the attention and the fascination and the movement, because it's like, well, I hunted a mouse and ate the mouse. Well, but now there's a rabbit and I'm going to have him too. So you can kind of hack their brain like that.
Okay.
Because of the training and the education that I had in terms of the needs for a cat with the enrichment play aspects, I feel like I fall short in that. Because I feel like I feel short, that's why she's bored and she sleeps all day. So am I hearing from you that I'm not necessarily falling short per se? I'm just observing her natural behaviors within the day. Because of her condition, I can't necessarily give her height or wall shelving like I typically would. So, yeah, I guess because I can't do some of those things, I feel like she's bored.
So it's a little of column A and a little of column B, in the sense that I think probably just about every pet parent, myself included, could potentially do more on the side of enrichment for our pets. Because in the wild, and I always defer back to the wild as for what is natural for an animal, what is normal, what is best case scenario. Now, there are some downsides to the wild, but I'm not including those in my analysis of what we're talking about here. So in the wild situation, animals are living in a very dynamic environment. An environment that is changing on a regular basis with a surprise up its sleeve, in an environment that can change its structure and visibility. So if you, example, have a very windy occasion, then a couple of trees might fall down, or there's displacement of some of the stuff. There are populations who live in the nearby territories who fluctuate in size or try and encroach on your territory or leave markings, or there's a new creature that's walked through your habitat that you might want to eat. I mean, there's so many different examples of what can change. So it's a very dynamic environment. That's the key point. And when we live in a home with our pets, it's a very static environment. That dynamic fluidity of this is changing, this is unexpected, I didn't know what to do there, wow, that was unusual, didn't see that coming. None of that is there. And animals are absolutely designed to be problem solvers. So we put them in an environment where there are very few problems for them to solve, because we say to them, I love you so much, I'm going to solve all your problems. You don't have to hunt anymore. You don't have to find food. You don't have to do bedding things anymore. You don't have to find a best friend. If you're cold, I'm going to make you warm. Like, we just give them everything, so they don't have to problem solve anymore. And so that's when boredom comes in. Now, what you then tend to see in many animals is I mean, this is a mass generalization, but typically there's 2 major responses that you get from boredom. One is apathy and turning off and doing nothing. And the other is some kind of occupation to fill the time, because they have nothing to do. They start getting creative. And that typically is a very unattractive set of behaviors in terms of self-injury, feather plucking, or biting their paws, or rocking backwards and forwards, or pacing up and down, like, those, we call them stereotypies or self-harm behaviors. So when boredom becomes extreme, you either get shut down or you get replacement of healthy activity with unhealthy activity. So boredom's a critical issue for us to deal with. And in the case of pets, what we often see is a recreational barker for dogs, right? They're like, oh, nothing to do, nothing's going on, everything's the same, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll entertain myself by barking. Because usually when I bark, I get some kind of a response. Someone yells, shut up, Fido, but at least it's better than nothing. So we get recreational barkers, we get recreational chewers, we get recreational all kinds of things, but they're inappropriate behaviors from what the parent wants, right? And with cats, we typically find recreational biters or attackers, right? So we get that, oh my gosh, out of nowhere, this like banshee cat just like sunk her teeth into me kind of thing. And we get, because they're going, oh, there's nothing to hunt here. There's nothing to hunt. I never let me catch my own food, and yet look at me. I'm this super OG like creature with nails and spikes and death weapons all over me, right? I better put them to use. Excellent. I'm bored. I'll put them to use on the furniture. right? And then we've got maladaptive behavior. So boredom is a huge problem, and we can all do better to enrich our environments by making it more dynamic, by giving them more of our time and attention when they're in their circadian rhythm pattern of wanting that. We can do that by doing environmental enrichment. We can do that with training. We can do that with socialization. We can do that with desensitization. There's a bunch of tactics, and I dive into all of that side of things in that last pillar, pillar 7, which is the mental health and happiness bit, because that is that mental health space, that brain. What is my brain doing? What problems am I solving? How happy do I feel? All of that's packaged in there. But, and here's the big but, that was column A. This is now column B. But you don't need to panic that you need to provide stimulation and enrichment and training and all of those things 24/7 for a cat. Because a cat's lifestyle, naturally their lifestyle is 18 to 20 hours of chill factor, which is one of the reasons they make such superior pets, right, than if you were to have a monkey. Like, everyone goes, oh my gosh, a monkey's so cute, let's have a monkey as a pet. You would die having a monkey as a pet. Like, I'm just saying, right? Because
Yeah, Ross on Friends had
they are
issues.
active the whole time. And so it's like having a 2-year-old for 25 years, right? You have to devote 100% of your attention to. Nobody wants a monkey as a pet, okay? You want a cat, because a cat is superior. They're fantastic. They're so able to look after themselves that they come to you when they need something, and you can be rewarded with that. You can give them all the things that they need, and they're going to appreciate that because they love the finer things in life and being pampered. But they are not going to drive you to distraction 24/7 with their needs and demands, because they're not needy. They're just so beautifully, I'm cool, I'm chill, look at me, I'm a queen, it's fine.
I love that. What you said is just beautiful. And that helps my heart feel more at ease that I'm not doing her a disservice and having her solely indoors in this sterile environment.
We're not
thank
boring,
you.
so we're happy to learn that.
So let me interrupt just for 1 second to say there are a bunch of easy things that you can do to almost passively increase any cat's welfare, right? So cats love a surplus of resources. A dog is very happy with 1 tennis ball, right? Cats, no, thank you. We like more. So where you have a cat, you need to have an extra litter box per the number of cats you have. 3 cats in your house, you need at least 4 litter boxes, for example, right? So we're always adding 1. So if you've got 1 cat, you want 2 boxes. Beds. They love their bed, as you know, right? 20 hours a day in bed. So to give them a multiple of beds, you don't need to have 20 beds, but if you've got like 3 or 4 beds in different places, and you let them choose, just watch where they go and choose to make their own little nests and things, and then say, okay, I'm going to get you another bed and put that there, right? Now you're giving them options. They like to have options, partly because it gives them that freedom and sense of accomplishment. They're doing a little problem solving. What do I feel like? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that one. I'll try that one. Yeah, that one's good. But if they don't have, they've got options of 1, then they go, well, I guess I'll line the bed because it's the only one. So options give them that mental gymnastics a little bit to go and enjoy things more. But then we can do things like scent, because we forget how powerful the sense of scent and the sense of hearing is for cats. So cats are like us, that vision is their primary source of information, whereas a dog, it's their nose. But very closely after is their ears. So cats go eyes, then ears, then nose. Okay. And we forget smell. Smell is so important for cats. So bringing in fragrances. Now, please do not do fake fragrances. Don't do Yankee candles or any other scented candles. Don't do spray aerosols.
Yes.
Don't do scented laundry detergents. Don't do any of that stuff, right?
Yes.
We're talking about nature scents, the sense of herb gardens, flowers, bee pollen, aromatherapy when they are organic oils. We're talking about the stuff that you can make your own candles. So have a soy wax candle. For all the candle people out there, I'm a candle people. So soy wax with essential oils, absolutely fine for cats because it burns clean. There's no black smoke that comes out of it because it's not petroleum. And there's no VOCs because we're talking about real scent that then has a medicinal or a calming or a stimulatory or whatever kind of effect on the animals, so they can be enjoying what you're enjoying at the same time without being poisoned in the process. So these are ways of doing passive enrichment in the home without having to rearrange your furniture, buy 73 toys and a new best friend. But let me go to the microbiome. What would you like to know about microbiome?
Yes. So that's one of your pillars. And you said to support the microbiome and ensure that that is healthy and up to par. And I just wanted to ask, what do you suggest and how we do that? I know about microbiome restorative therapy, also known as fecal transplants, is one way,
Mhm.
but what are some other ways that we can support
So fecal
microbiome?
microbiome transplant is amazing. It's a really fabulous therapy, but it's not what you want to be doing as an everyday kind of a thing. This is a life-saving thing. This is a turn it all around, solve the problem therapy. So the microbiome as a concept, microbiome is a collection, think of it as a rainforest or a tropical reef, a very dense, highly interspecies community of microorganisms that work symbiotically, work together for good and together for your good or your cat's good. So the gut microbiome gets most of the attention, but there's also the skin microbiome and there's also the oral or dental microbiome, which is equally important for pets to have those nurtured by you in the way that you care for them, their lifestyle. Okay. So how do we do that on a day-to-day or regular basis when we're not going to be doing fecal transplants every week, right? So the gut microbiome relies on having, this is the simplified version, but relies on having probiotics go in. So probiotics are the actual organisms themselves. So you get that from fermented foods, for example, and you get that from eating the intestines of a prey species, for example. So for cats who don't go around eating vegetables, they get about 3% of their diet as green tripe, which is the digestive tract of a herbivore that has somewhat semi-processed grasses and seeds and plant matter in it that has been fermented by that animal. So the rabbit or the horse or whoever it is that the cat's going to eat, depending on the size of the cat, is going to have that material in the gut system, and that's where the cat is going to get their fermented foods from. So they do in fact eat it in nature and they do require it. So that's topping up, that's putting a new supply of those microorganisms in to keep that colony super diverse and super strong. But these guys need to eat food. Okay, they're not magical pixies. They need to eat food. So you need to give them prebiotics, which is essentially fiber. And again, cats with a high protein obligate carnivore diet don't usually get a lot of fiber in our world. In their world, they do. How? Because they eat the feathers and the skin and the scales and the horns and the weird bits. And that's full of fiber. And that helps to feed the microbiota in their gut system so that then that can provide them with the health benefits of proper absorption, digestion, absorption, and assimilation, the creation of the immune system, and thirdly, the production of serotonin. Okay, so when you have animals who are depressed, lethargic, non-responsive, just miserable, look to their gut, because 80+% of the serotonin, which is the happy hormone that makes them go, oh my gosh, life's amazing, let's get on and do it, is actually made in the gut by the microbiome. And if you do not have a functioning microbiome, you don't have happy hormone, which means you have a depressed animal. So the gut is way more than just helping you nourish your body with the food. But again, you could have the best quality food. You can do pillar number 1, the species appropriate diet, to the nth degree. But if you don't have the gut microbiome, pillar number 3, in place, then that food is literally just going through a pipe from A to B and ending up in the litter box. It's not actually getting into the cells where the body uses it to actually develop health and longevity. So the microbiome assists in that digestion, absorption, so putting it from the gut into the blood, and then assimilation from the blood into the cells. So that 3-step process is instigated or assisted by the microbiome. Then you've got the skin microbiome that is on the outside of their bodies, protecting them from external threats and keeping their skin in good balance and in good condition. And then the oral microbiome is protecting them, because again, that's another gateway into the body. Okay, so there's protection there, but it's also a pretty janky place, if they are going to be eating a dead mouse and stuff like that. Like you kind of want to have some good bacteria in there fighting the good fight, and keeping that place clean and healthy. There's a whole bunch we could sort of unpack into, like each tooth has its own microbiome and how does that work and what happens to the inside of the tooth, and right, but we don't have to get into the weeds. The point is understanding that those are the 3 microbiomes that we need to support our pets with.
And how can we tell if our species appropriate diet that we're giving is nourishing the gut microbiome, or if it's just going through, like you said, into the litter box.
So the good news is on that, it's really easy, because what a cat is supposed to eat naturally will naturally feed properly a cat's proper microbiome. So the one answer is the same answer for both. So the answer to the species appropriate nutrition question then for cats is, are your cats getting a balanced meal of muscle meat, organ meat, collagen tissues, and bones? Okay. So there's 4 types of protein. We think of protein and we think of a steak or a chicken breast or something because that's what we eat. But protein to a cat is all 4 of those body parts. It's the organs, it's the muscles, it's the bones, and it's all the connective stuff. So their bowl needs to be complete with all 4 types of protein. And as I said, about 3% of that green fermented material that you get from green tripe. Okay. That's the perfect bowl for a cat. And then that is the perfect bowl for the microbiome species that live in a cat. Now, it would be different if it was us, and different if it's a dog, and different if it's a dolphin. But for a cat, the right diet for a cat is the right diet for their microbiome.
And so do you suggest that we get a microbiome test for them to kind of have a foundation and a baseline of what's going on in there, and then be able to counteract that with supplements or diet?
I think test-based nutrition is a fantastic option that we now have for pet care. It's a bit of a bells and whistles one. It's not going to be the life and death situation, except perhaps if you're, really struggling to reclaim health for your pets. But I think it's an excellent thing to do if you do have the means to invest in that kind of knowledge, because that means you're now empowered with so much more information. These tests are so good now, because so many thousands of people have done it, that the data set, the pool of information is so huge that they can identify very easily. And they're very easy to interpret, those tests as well. And then you can see, are you hitting the nail on the head, or is there room for improvement? And if so, where to improve and how to improve. And so it's very simple then to solve a problem that will take your cat, let's say, from a 6 to a 9 on that scale of 1 to 10, right? So they can live for fine on a 6, right? But they're not going to have that full health, that full lifespan, that full thriving. On a 9, you're getting them really close to that. If all it takes is a test to see what's missing, and then a short-term supplementation to replenish that in their body, then you've very easily solved them from a 6 to a 9 and up-leveled their quality of life.
Is there a connection between gut microbiome and fecal transplants to oral health?
Sort of, yes. Sort of, no, because the oral microbiome is a completely different colony to the gut microbiome. The oral microbiome is obviously going to be swallowed at some stage by the pets and then make its way through the GI tract and end up mixing somewhat. So there's a little bit of a downstream effect. And then as you support the gut microbiome in, we just said, a species appropriate nutrition, for example, right? And some fermented foods, and you can use all sorts of things. And I have a book about toppers for cats, toppers meaning longevity superfoods that we put on top of their bowl as a sort of a garnish that adds in some of these health benefits that go above and beyond the basic bowl, right? So you can use some of these things to so when you're healing or improving the gut microbiome in that way, overall health improves. Because the second action of the microbiome after the digestion part that we talked about is the creation of the immune system. Okay, so when your immune system gets optimized, remember, immune system is one of those 5 foundations, one of those key things that drive your biology and your health. So when your gut microbiome is optimized, your immune system is stronger, it's better provided for, it's got better numbers and all the rest of it. So then for overall health is improved, which means then as a downstream effect, the oral environment is going to be a healthier place. So it's an indirect connection between the two as opposed to a direct correlation.
Okay. You say that most of us are getting it wrong when it comes to looking out for our pets' needs, even basic needs and care, and have called it a modern tragedy, which is so accurately named, and I agree 100%. I was one of those pet guardians who was getting it wrong, and I continue to witness that 90% or more of pet guardians out there do too. What are the inadvertent mistakes we are doing that are unintentionally sabotaging our pets' health, quality of life, and longevity?
In a nutshell, it's those 7 aspects of their lifestyle. If you were to sum it up and say, we are inadvertently, and I really do want to stress that it's inadvertent, that people aren't being pet parents to be jerks and mess their pets around and cause harm, right? We absolutely know that. I would never accuse someone of doing that. But we haven't, as a society, right? Pet parents don't have a go-to person to tell them about the species-specific needs and best practice for animal husbandry. Now, in a zoo where I also work, we do. Keepers are trained and given all sorts of information and resources to go and find out exactly who they're looking after and how best to do it. But as a pet parent, we go, oh, they're domestic. I already know about cats, or I already know about dogs. I know how to do that. And we just get one and we don't bother doing a lot of research. And when we run into a problem, we've only got one professional to go to. We've only got the vet. And the vet only has one toolkit of information to draw from to solve that problem, which I said before is allopathic veterinary medicine, which doesn't cure the animals. It sustains the symptoms or tries to reduce the symptoms, but it doesn't address the underlying root cause of the biology to repair it so the animal can then get healthy again. So when we as pet parents don't have a go-to person, don't have a place or a trusted source or something to learn, and we don't need we could do this in a day, right? We don't, to learn those basics, then we are just by default going to make mistakes. Like anything that you do for the first time where you don't have a trainer. So if I was to start playing ice hockey, which I couldn't do very well, right? I'm going to get a lot of technique wrong. I'm going to get a lot of mistakes. I'm going to be pretty rubbish. I'm probably going to end up injured along the way, right? But my intentions were good. But if I had a coach who taught me and showed me and I did a training for a day and then I practiced on my skates and I did some stuff and I learned the rules, well, now I'm going to be way better. It's as simple as that. So we're inadvertently doing it through lack of having a go-to resource, lack of knowing what is best for the species and bringing an anthropocentric focus of the human way is the best way because that's how I look after me. So that's how I'll look after my pets instead.
Okay. And you also accurately breached the topic of incorrectly caring for our pets through learned behavior, a topic so important and not nearly spoke on enough. Incorrectly caring for our pets through learned behavior becomes a vicious cycle, generations long, that has left our pets unhealthy, depleted, and deficient. I am guilty of this with my little one, Monkey Bean, who was my first furry child as an adult. And unfortunately, this is how over 90% of pet guardians care for their pets, mostly from, like you said, just not knowing better, like myself. So can you speak on those learned behaviors that are leaving our pets in peril and just how it affects them?
So when you say learned behaviors, you're talking about what we pick up from vets, marketing, advertising, word of mouth, what we think we know through societal forces of pet parenting.
Yeah, that and also what we learn from our ancestors. It's a lot of the things that we see growing up of how you're supposed to take care of animals. And so I, as an adult, just kind of mimic that. And then I realize, oh, that's not proper, or we shouldn't be doing that, or there's a better way. So it becomes like a generational sort of way of caring for pets. And like you said, we're inadvertently not necessarily caring for them correctly, and it's leaving their health in peril and chronically deficient in so many things. So I guess specifically, what learned behaviors are you aware of that's causing our pets to be in peril?
So probably the biggest one has been the shift from feeding real food to feeding ultra-processed food.
Yes.
So science grows in its bank of knowledge over time. So what we knew 100 years ago about pet nutrition compared to what we know today is a drop in the ocean. However, at the same time, you have societal changes, right? As things come into reality, then become history, then become the way we change and adapt, right? So there's how does a society change and evolve over time? That has meant that we have put a higher premium on convenience over health. Now, we didn't necessarily make that trade-off deliberately, but it's the net effect. So 100 years ago, they might not have understood about pet nutrition in the details scientifically that we do now, but they did actually know how to give decent food to their animals, so their animals live longer. Okay, so you've got two forces that are sort of influencing that. So unless we can understand that, and that takes some fairly meta-analysis of your life, you stop and take stock of things, and typically pet parents are only forced to do this when they confront a health crisis in their pets, and they go down that pathway of let's use the allopathic model to try and fix it. Oh, that didn't work and it's very expensive and now we're on these drugs, but the symptoms aren't going, like, until you get that crisis point and your heart breaks and you say, gosh, there has to be something else. There needs to be another way, a better way. What is the better way? And then people start on this journey of discovery, right? That's when the unlocking of that door of better solutions typically opens for people. But wouldn't it be great if we could do that from the beginning?
Right.
Wouldn't it be great if it was now somehow in our zeitgeist that society knows that ultra-processed food, which we know for humans is absolute trash, right? Why don't we make that same mental connection to say, well, if it's trash for us, then it's going to be trash for our animals. There's no animal in the wild that's eating biscuits. Like, they just don't do it. There's no animal in the wild who is cooking their food.
Correct. Yes.
There's no lion barbecue out on the savannah. There's no wolf little sausage making factory in the forest. I can guarantee you that, right? They are eating raw species appropriate food because that's all they know and that's what works for them. So if we can just rewild some of the way that we look after them and go from our 3 out of 10 human-centric, processed, fake, artificial kind of style to a 10 out of 10 natural, this is like the wild animals do it style, then we've solved the problem.
And I agree. And I love that you said that that's the main thing, because that was after observation and retrospect on myself. That's the one thing, major thing that I knew that I got wrong with Monkey. And from that point on, I vowed to only feed raw food to cats because that's what they eat in the wild. And I just started to connect the dots, and I'm like, okay, well, if she was living outside or if they were living outside, like what would they be eating and how would it be in consistency or in medium? Is it cooked? Is it raw? Is it processed? And everything just made sense to me. It was like they're hunting, they're eating it raw, and it's warm typically when they eat it. So I just vowed to kind of mimic what they were doing in the wild and give them the best that I could in that way.
And that's what it takes, is that cognitive connection to say, oh, hang on a minute, I might not be getting it right. What could be a better solution? So I just want to fast track that for people and say, hey, before you make 10 mistakes and it's 10 years down the line and get to a crisis situation, how about you know up front and just introduce to how you look after them some very simple tweaks and upgrades that mean you get a vastly superior outcome. I'd love to sit here and say I'm absolutely brilliant and it's rocket science and I'm a genius, but it's truthfully not, right? It is copying nature's wisdom, if you like, and and rewilding the way we do it. Instead of doing it the plastic artificial way, we're going to do it the real animal way.
And I love this term too, the rewilding, which we're going to talk about in a second as well. So lastly, to sum up that topic that we just discussed, how can we get those living the modern tragedy through learned behavior to realize what we learned was incorrect and that there's a better way, but more importantly, an accurate way to care for our pets, a way that gives them a sturdy foundation and optimal health with the gift of longevity?
So I think this podcast is in part the answer to that. I mean, it really is. It's really disseminating that information. It's getting people aware that that's available to them, that that's a situation they might want to think about, and just empower them with the very simple steps of what it takes to make that change. The good side of the equation, or the good part in that dilemma, if you like, is that I haven't yet met a pet parent who's not motivated to do the best for their animal. So our hearts are 100% in the right place. It's just we're withering for lack of knowledge, withering from an information overload when you go looking for knowledge, because that's really tricky to navigate that entire, like, oh my gosh, my animal has just been diagnosed with XYZ disease. I don't like the 3 treatment options perhaps that have been presented to me. Is there something out there that is more suitable to them? And they start looking. And they look and look and look, and the more they look, the more confused they get. And they think, oh my gosh, I am not qualified for this. This is impossible. How the heck am I going to help my animals? This is a disaster. And there's a negative spiral there. To say, do you know what? go to your, friendly neighborhood longevity zoologist, right, and ask them. Or go to a holistic vet who has a second toolkit to work from as well as the allopathic model. Or get creative in their thinking, go, well, who else knows about animals? What do they do in the zoo to do so? And look at I don't know how to kind of stimulate that first. It's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. Do you start with the people who are looking and needing an answer, or do you start with the people before they know they need an answer? And it'd be great to deal with both, to solve both. And if you come up with a brilliant way of doing that, let me know.
Yeah, I think what I've encountered is that with our friends and family, they all still feed dry food. And when they come to us mentioning that their animal now has A, B, and C, and their vet recommends prescription dry food or just a certain type of dry food, not necessarily prescription. And then you have myself with the knowledge that I have with species appropriate feeding and their innate needs, whether it be dog or cat, and what is appropriate. I try to share that knowledge with them and let them know that technically this isn't what they should be eating, and the food is potentially causing all the ailments that your pet now has. And I receive a lot of pushback because it's usually either, well, this is what I've known my whole life to do, is to feed them dry food or canned food here and there as a treat. And this is what I know, so this is what I do. And my vet is saying to kind of do the same, but with this recommended brand versus this prescription brand. So that's what I'm going to do. And they feel like it's kind of the end all be all because that's what their vet is saying. And for me, it's so incredibly frustrating because I live the experience giving that type of food, seeing what happens, my cat getting intestinal lymphoma and IBS and the whole thing from food. So I guess for me, it's frustrating because I'm like, I understand your learned behavior and I understand where you're coming from because I was that person. However, I up-leveled my education and I now know what they should be eating and why and how it can help your animal in its ailments, potentially reverse it, manage it appropriately, but yet it just feels like it falls on deaf ears. For me, it's very frustrating. I don't know. Am I getting it right? Am I asking the right question?
Right. Yeah, I totally get you. So, like I said earlier on in our conversation, I think a big problem is that we have almost created medicine as this sort of deity figure of it knows best and only it knows the answers.
Right.
And so we then look to our medical professionals as the be all and end all oracle of wisdom of what we're supposed to do. And I think that is a very modern approach. I think that's a very prevalent state of mind for maybe 60, 80 years. It's very recent. Prior to that, it didn't work that way. Prior to that, people took a lot more autonomy over their own health, a lot more responsibility for their own health. We have in different countries around the world, so it will vary, but we have systems in place where there is a medical safety net in the human world, right? So people think with impunity, I'll just do this with my life because it's fine. I have a medical system on tap to go and fix me. So we allow bad decisions to come in and be normalized and accepted, knowing that there is a healthcare system in the UK at any rate where you can be looked after free of charge. So there's an abdication of responsibility. There's an abdication of, well, I'm not even going to go bother learning because it looks really big and complicated and I'm not that smart. I didn't learn these things. I dropped out of school or I focused my attentions in another direction, whatever it is. I don't have time to go learn. Fine, but those things are valid, not a problem. However, do you even know the basics on how to stay healthy? That used to be taught in schools. I don't even know if it is anymore. The basics on health and wellness. Nobody wants to listen to the government telling you what to do, right? That's a horrible thing. The governments know that. We know that, right? So that's not a good solution to the problem. So somehow there needs to be a societal shift where we say that our doctors are intelligent and caring and compassionate in the ways that they can help us. But that is not a blanket rule of every aspect of health. So listen, they're great. Allopathic medicine is fabulous for if you've got accidents and injuries and infectious diseases. But when you're looking at aging, when you're looking at chronic diseases, when you're looking at the preservation of health and preventative stuff, their toolkit is not equipped. Their toolkit is just not up to, it cannot deliver the goods. But out in the wild, they can. But we're so disconnected from the wildness that we don't understand that anymore. We don't understand how healing it can be to go and spend time in the sea, because we didn't learn that at school. We don't practice it anymore. No one's talking about that in conversation. There isn't part of the zeitgeist that understanding of the therapeutics of thalassotherapy. We don't understand red light therapy because we look at that and go, that sounds a bit woo-woo because I can't actually pick up and touch red light. Like it's ethereal kind of stuff. Like I can pick up a tablet and swallow it. So how can light be a thing? And we just go, no. And we think we're too smart. So we go, no, that doesn't work. But people don't want to take the time to read the science, and I don't blame them. It's not a fun thing reading a science journal paper. They're very dry and boring, but they do have great nuggets of information. And so that's why I then turn that dry and boring into hopefully something that's much more accessible, so that when people do hit that point of saying, I'd like to know more, it becomes very easy to learn, very stimulating as well, because you kind of go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's so simple. If I just switch from processed food to raw food, then not only do I have really high quality nutrients going in, but I also eliminate 80% of the toxins that are going in, which means we're not going to have the inflammation, which means we're not going to have the aging process, which means we're not going to be encouraging cancer to come into effect, which means my animal's going to have way more energy. Wow, who knew that that was so simple?
I agree. And that was the exact thing that I thought when I had the revelation. And the number one thing is diet. Like it literally all comes back to food and what you're giving them. It either creates health or it creates disease. And it's it's the biggest pillar, the most important, and the foundation for everything.
But I think the fight after that is changing the habits and also the convenience of things. When you compare having a bowl of kibble out all day and doing like feedings of proper food through the day, I think a lot of people are just not sometimes open of changing things.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is convenience. Like you mentioned, the dry food was created out of convenience. And so for a lot of pet guardians, convenience is their number one sort of factor when it comes to feeding their animals. So it's easier just to put a bowl of dry food out there and have them graze all day, which I believe is not their natural state in the wild. They don't graze all day. Am I correct?
You are correct, yes.
Okay.
That graze all day is for cows and, the animals that eat grasses and things like that, right? It's not a cat's system. It's not a dog system either. But here's the thing. It's not a choice between convenience and non-convenience. It's a choice between healthy or not healthy. And there are plenty of healthy choices that have convenience. For example, you can have freeze-dry raw nutrition that packages similarly to kibble in the sense that it can sit on a shelf. It doesn't need a refrigerator or a freezer. It can go with you when you're traveling or out for, whatever. It's lightweight. It has that I can sit in the bowl all day and not go off factor, even in the summertime. So there's a lot of the benefits of what you might say benefits of kibble, right? Without any of the negatives. So feeding species appropriate diet can be as convenient as what we've defaulted to on the bad side of the equation. It doesn't have to be a trade-off saying, oh my gosh, now I have to spend an hour a day making homemade meals and catering to my pets. If that's your jam, go for it. But if you're like me and you're like, no, I'm doing other things, you can still have 10 out of 10 species appropriate nutrition and giving your pets that massive boost to their entire welfare, right? As easily as what you were doing before. So you don't have to compromise. And it's not even a compromise thing on price either, because the things are so, you pay so much money for marketing and packaging and so forth, especially if you're buying these named prescription brand things. I mean, they're not the cheapest end of the stick. So you can, at a comparable price to what you were paying for whatever food you were giving, you can find a raw alternative. You can find a brand that meets your financial requirements as well as your convenience requirements, and at the same time, your pet's nutritional requirements.
I agree with you 100% that freeze-dried raw is just as quote-unquote convenient as the dry kibble. which is a very accurate point to make. And I think for those of us that are in the knowledge in the field of knowing about species appropriate nutrition and the forms and the mediums that it come in, we know that. But I think the 95% of guardians who are strictly dry, I don't think they know that. So the pushback that I get when I mention raw is that it's time consuming and there's so much more things involved and it's not convenient. And it's always sort of the same things that I hear. So I think maybe the conversation should be changed to not just letting them know about species appropriate nutrition, but also there are different forms and it can be just as convenient, but the healthy version of dry. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's completely avoidable. What the path that our pets are on as their default lifestyle, as their default health journey, the path that we have put them on is completely avoidable. I say completely. It is, we know already, it's over 90% avoidable. There is that genetic factor, and I will acknowledge that open-heartedly, right? But it's a very small percentage of what's driving a pet in that direction. So we have so much control, so much ability in our decision making that really I think that it is our responsibility as a devoted pet parent. If you're just a casual pet and you're kind of like, oh, well, we kind of need a guard dog, I don't really love him that much, he can just sit outside, right? If you're that kind of person, you're probably not listening to this podcast anyway. But for the majority of us who are pet parents who go, oh my gosh, I'd love to have an animal in my life to share that with and have all this relationship and do fun things, then you should really be saying to yourself, what's the best I can give? And not just stopping that conversation with yourself when you've seen an ad on TV that says, oh my gosh, vets recommend, or whatever it happens to be, right? But to say, no, hang on a minute. Let me just use my actual brain for a second. What is best for my pet? What is best for my cat? What does a cat eat? What does a cat need? Who is a cat? What does a cat do? What does a cat like? Oh, okay, I'll do those things.
And that's exactly what I did, because I realized growing up that I didn't know. It was just like generalized having cats and dogs, and we had what feels like every animal and reptile under the sun. And I don't think we ever really knew exactly of who a cat really is and who a dog really is and who a rabbit really is and what individualized care to that species, including nutrition and enrichment, was. Like, they were just kind of there. And like the dogs lived outside, the cats lived outside, the rabbits were outside in cages. And as a child, you don't really ask yourself if this is being done correctly. You see it being done and you think that that's just the way you do things. And then I realized when I got older and I moved away and started to see the way other people were living, and all of their animals were like, dogs were always inside, cats too, really. And then it got me to thinking of like, oh, is there another way to do this? And yeah, I just did the deep dive, and I was like, how do we really care for our cats and our dogs and their needs and enrichment? So yeah, asking those questions are big.
And I think that's where I have an unfair advantage, we should say, in that having worked in zoos and being a zoologist as opposed to a veterinarian or another kind of animal professional, I come at this whole question with a different lens, I'm seeing it differently. Because of the training that I have as a zoologist, I've really taken the time to understand what the animals are, who they are, what they need, what they do, what they like, what's important to them. And because I wanted to work as an applied welfare zoologist and actually bringing this to them rather than studying in isolation and writing those papers, which is very noble, and I couldn't do without that half of the scientific community, right? But I wanted to be at the end where I'm, face to whiskers with the animals and making them happy, right? So I was always asking myself those questions. Who is the animal in front of me? Who are they as their species, and who are they as that individual? So what does their species require in terms of its needs and so forth? And then what are the preferences of this particular one here? And when I can combine both of those together, I have now optimized that particular animal's quality of life. And that's an advantage that I think that most pet parents don't have, because typically the choices available to a pet parent is, let's say, 10 species choices. Like, you can't just go and say, I'm going to have a zoo animal, right? You're going to have cat, dog, horse, rabbit, guinea pig, goldfish, budgerigar. Like you got, let's just pretend you've got limited numbers of choices. And because they're domestic animals, you've grown up with them to some extent. You've seen them. Somebody else had them. You feel like you've already acquired sufficient knowledge as to what to do. So you don't take it that next step. So I don't quite know the answer to how do we unlock the imagination or curiosity of pet parents to ask those questions in advance. But they sure as heck do ask themselves those questions when there's a crisis point and they feel helpless and want to be able to do something.
Well, it's quite a telling difference and contrast with your approach versus a veterinarian's education approach. And I really hope and wish that every veterinarian getting into the field is doing it because they love animals and they want to help animals. And it would be ideal if every single vet asked themselves the same questions that you asked yourself in the perspective and approach that you have as a zoologist. So I think that difference in contrast is very telling.
It does give me, I think, a very different perspective. And so I work alongside a lot of holistic vets because my clients have their own healthcare professionals around them. They're their healthcare community who's helping their pet with diagnostics and prescribing and all those things that I don't do as a non-clinician. But we work great because I see something completely differently. As you say, that lens puts a different filter on it. And my interpretation then will be different. We see another facet. It's like when you have those 3D glasses or something, you just suddenly a whole nother world opens up. You're like, oh, wow. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's do that.
What are your top 3 recommendations for pet guardians who want to do better, even if it's small changes?
3. Okay. I would start with food. We've talked a lot about food actually in this episode, and it often tends to be that way because that's something that's incredibly familiar to us already and very valuable to our pets. But anything that you can do to move away from highly processed food to a more natural diet. Now, I always like to pitch the 10 out of 10 gold standard as the benchmark to aim for. So here in that case, for cats, it's going to be raw, species appropriate diet. So 3% vegetable matter in the form of fermented food, and 97% is going to be the muscle meat, organ meat, bone meat, and connective tissue meat. And for cats, it's very important to include that connective tissue that's often neglected and to their detriment. So changing to a brand that has a balance of those things is so simple. You're just switching from buying the bag of kibble here from that brand to buying a box of raw food from this brand here. They will deliver it to your door. There's no barrier at all to doing this. So this is the easiest way to make a big difference. Studies show that depending on where they are in their lifespan already, you on average are going to get 3 to 4 years additional of healthy cat life from just that one change. So that's a big, big header. Now, if you start earlier in life, you'll get more, obviously. Later in life, it'll be less, but that just gives you some context. It's almost identical for a dog, except we are going to increase that green component to about 10%. And for dogs, it can be a combination of raw, cooked, and fermented, whereas with our cats, we want to stick mostly to the fermented. So muscle meat, organ meat, tissue meat, raw meaty bones, definitely. The compositions of those are slightly different. So for a dog, the muscle meat is 30% of the bowl, and for cats, it would be 50%, but the principle is effectively the same. Number 2, this is neglected. Food, everyone knows about. Detoxification. I very, very seldom met a pet parent who is doing regular detoxification for their pets, but unfortunately, it's absolutely essential, and it might actually be more important than the food. There's debate about that, but it is that important. I kind of don't have time to go into unpacking that right now, although that'd be a fun topic to do, but the easiest, best way that I know of to do that is a product that I like to recommend people use. I don't know if I can say products on here, but it is a product that you add to their food or water. For cats, I typically add it to their food because they're less of a free drinker than a dog. And it provides them not only with every single essential daily mineral that their body needs, so it's a nutritional supplement. At the same time, it has a detoxification action that cleans not only toxins from the bloodstream, which is kind of the easy part of the equation, but it also cleans out toxins from the actual cells themselves, which is very tricky to do. And it has almost no taste. So I haven't yet met a cat that doesn't take to it So you are getting daily detoxification and the mineral boost with one product. So doing a detox is what I would say is action number 2. To everyone can start with that, and it's so important because their bodies are tiny and toxins accumulate so quickly. Cats are grooming 40% of the time that they're awake. I mean, the problem is huge. Number 3.
Can you mention the detox products?
Yes, I can. So it's a product called Beam Minerals. Think of a sunbeam, Beam Minerals. Okay, so there are 2 products. They're liquids. You just put them on the food. It's humic and fulvic minerals. So these come from ancient soils where the soil comprised of everything that it needs now. Unfortunately, our soils now are relatively depleted, which is part of why this is a problem in our food supply. But Beam Minerals will give you that massive effect. And then action number 3, if it was a dog, I would say absolutely change their water supply from tap water to anything else. And I'm a very big fan of hydrogen water. I'm a massive fan of oxygen water. But with cats who are less of a free drinker, number 3, what would I do with cats? I actually would bring in zoopharmacognosy. I think that's my next best, biggest hitter for cats. So zoopharmacognosy, for anyone who doesn't know, is an aspect of wild health. Zoopharmacognosy is animal self-medication. It's the way that animals in the wild will heal themselves when they have accidents, injuries, and diseases. They have the ability to self-select what they require and dose appropriately to heal. And they do that in the wild. In our home, they don't have access to those things. So for cats, I love to bring those into the home to give them access to help them then self-select, because they know long before we do when they are feeling off, when something's not right in their body and how to go about fixing it. But they just don't have the freedom to go and access the things to put themselves back together again. And we are not astute enough to understand and see what's going on. And so we don't give them that route, and they end up having to take some other pathway down to, something detrimental. So zoopharmacognosy, you can make a herb garden. Herb garden has all kinds of medicinal properties to cats, but there's also the pleasure aspect to it, because if you've ever seen cat mint, they're going to roll around in that, they're going to crush those things, they're going to inhale those beautiful fumes and smells of the plant. That's what we're doing. So there's huge amounts to unpack again in that topic as well. But for cats, I think zoopharmacognosy is amazing because you're allowing them to do the problem solving, to fix the problem earlier than we would ever notice it, to do it at the correct dose, to do it completely naturally, and to do it without us necessarily, quote unquote, interfering, but facilitating. And their bodies respond so beautifully to it.
Yes, zoopharmacognosy is real and important aspect to incorporate. So we will have more info on zoopharmacognosy and self-selection at theholisticfeline.com within the pod blog for this episode. Okay, we are coming to an end and there is so much more to talk about. I would love to dive into regenerative medicine, anti-aging medicine, the concept of rewilding and wild health, all very interesting and important aspects to pet longevity. So, Penny, it's official. We are cordially inviting you back for part 2.
Thank you so much.
And so in closing for this one, do you have any closing thoughts or knowledge you would like to share?
Always. It's picking which bit to share. I think as we've discussed at quite some length today, like the biggest hurdle that our pets have is their parents' ignorance, right? And it's not ignorance because we don't care. It's ignorance because we just didn't know that we didn't know, right? There are things that I know I don't know. I don't know how to do accounting, right? But there's a bunch of stuff out there in the world that I don't even know that I don't know. And that's the problem. So I think if there's anything that you could do that would make a massive difference, it's to talk to other pet parents and say, hey, did you know that there's a better way? Did you know you've got 90% of control over your pet's health destiny? Did you know that by simplifying health to 7 things that you already do and just making better choices, you can prevent lifestyle diseases, you can prevent early onset death, you can prevent suffering, right? And just that awareness, because that then asks, people then go, that's really good news. I had no idea. Tell me more about that. I yet haven't met someone who said, nah, boring, shift, next, right? They don't pass the buck like that. They're like, oh, no, tell me more. I want to do my dog. And you then have this beautiful story of something about their pets, which is amazing conversation to have. But there's only one of me doing all this talking. So I need an army of compassionate, longevity zoologists out there to share that with the people they know to make that difference, because that's the kickstart to then getting a better result for the animals.
I'll be an honorary zoologist. Does that happen?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you let everyone know where they can find you, your social handles, what you offer, and all the fun stuff?
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. Zoolittle. You'll find me on Instagram as Dr. Zoolittle. The same thing with Facebook, although I don't habit that less. If you're on the professional side of things, then you'll find me on LinkedIn as Dr. Zoolittle. So those are the three main places. My website is drzoolittle.co. That's just .co at the end, not .com. And listen, we've talked again quite a lot about food. I have an amazing collection of brands that meet my 10 out of 10 criteria for pet food. So if you're a dog or if you're a cat, I've got two separate lists, because as we've said that it is a little different what they eat. But I have my recommended cat food list and my recommended dog food list. That's a free resource that I give to people, and it is clickable within there. So I'm just putting the information there for you to cut to the chase, cut out all the time wasting that it takes to go and research these things, and to say, hey, this one looks good. I like that. They deliver in my area. I like that price point. This branding looks nice. Oh, my cat loves this flavor, whatever. You can choose from that. But it just makes upgrading their food the easiest thing that you can possibly do. So that's a resource that's available. I do also have a guide to the 7 pillars of animal longevity, and you can also download that for free from my website, and that will introduce you in greater detail to what we've brushed the surface of today. It covers those 5 underlying areas of biology that makes all the difference to their health, and then also the 7 pillars and what you can do. And again, there's a bunch of links and information in that to help equip you to take a step in whichever direction you want to go to start up leveling. So I invite you to help yourselves to those resources. There's also a quiz on my website you can take to assess where you currently are with your pets, and I offer a pet health audit that will go into that at more detail. So if you do the quiz and you go, wow, I now know where I am, or actually that's got me starting to think, but I'd actually like a more scientific or a more in-depth or whatever, then the pet health audit is your option for that, and that's also available.
Beautiful wealth of knowledge. In your 7 pillars of animal longevity guide, you mentioned a few courses coming up in 2025, one being a certified animal health and wellness coach, which I find very exciting, and I'm certainly interested. What will this consist of?
That's the big course. So I have a smaller course for the 7 pillars for pet parents who want to know more about this. It's not science heavy. It gives you the equipment to know how to make the right decisions. It empowers you, right? So that's coming up very soon, actually. So there's a wait list to go onto that, and there are links on the website, or I'll put those in the show notes for you guys to access for that. The big course is actually a year-long program. It's a level 7 accredited program that will take you through in more detail. So this is more designed for those people who are in the pet professional world one way or another. So it might be a vet who wants to leave the allopathic model and move into the more natural space, the rewilded medicine approach. It may be someone who is a groomer or a dog walker or a dog sitter or runs the stables, or you fill in the blanks of what your pet career is. But this is a skill set that isn't being taught anywhere else. And it allows you to have then an edge in your business by saying, well, I also teach this, or we practice according to these principles, or I can tell you about, or, whatever. But it's very much allowing you to then become a bit more than the honorary zoologist. It's not you won't become a fully legal zoologist, but it will equip you with an accredited, recognized qualification to say that you can now talk about animal longevity, animal health, and in this very relatable to your clients, needs, and make a massive impact to the animal welfare.
I absolutely love it, and I want to say count me in on that one. on the big one, the certified animal health and wellness coach. I love it. Thank you so very much for joining us, Penny. And as I've always said, you're an Ivy League, you're a wealth of knowledge, and I could talk to you and listen to you for hours and hours and hours. So I want to thank you so much for your time given to us. It's an honor, and we appreciate it so much. You're an absolute delight. And we pet guardians, thank you for being on the planet at the same time as us. We are all better for it, and the animals thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it when people say the animals thank me too, because that's what makes me so happy, is just thinking of these words are going out, they're touching our heart, they're hopefully inspiring a bit of curiosity. And at the end of the day, there's going to be someone who wears whiskers and 4 paws whose life just got better. And that means the world. So thank you for sharing your airwaves and your audience with me. Thank you for inviting me to come back and to diving into the regenerative side, which is just amazing, the things that are possible there. I'm looking forward to that immensely. And yeah, I agree. We could literally talk all day.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast. It is created, hosted, produced, and released with love. And my hope is you learn something along the way. When we know better, we do better. Please share your knowledge and our podcast with others. For more educational content, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as Instagram at The Holistic Feline and online at theholisticfeline.com, where you will also find our blog that includes corresponding posts for each podcast episode with links to all the good stuff. Thank you again. We'll see you in the next episode.
The Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, website, blog, and socials are for informational and educational purposes only. All information, suggestions, recommendations, or comments, whether by written, verbal, audio, or otherwise, either direct, indirect, or association, is not a substitute for professional veterinary care. Please provide your pets with a minimum annual professional veterinary visit, and more often when health concerns arise. The Holistic Feline, Angela Warwick, and all guests and associates are speaking from experience and education. Please continue your research and form your own opinion. This is in no way a means to diagnose.